I'm a little bit hot, having a rush from Cannon Street, so apologies about my less than groomed look. Anyway, good morning, welcome. It's a beautiful day and you're in a beautiful building, and we're very proud of this building, but we're even more proud today to be here with our great partners, Sutton Trust. So I am Virginia Airy. I'm the UKI Chief Operating Officer at Deutsche Bank. I had to read that. And I do apologise because I have to read these notes. Usually I learn my speeches, but there's quite a lot of facts in here that even my little brain can't absorb and learn for you this morning. But yes, I am the Chief Operating Officer at Deutsche Bank, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to 21 Moorfields, our brand new regional headquarters. Today's conversation is being held in proud partnership with the Sutton Trust, one of our most valued collaborators and a true champion of social mobility. As founding and flagship partners of the Sutton Trust's Pathways to Banking and Finance programme, say that before a coffee, we're excited to shine a light on how we can open doors to more diverse talent through international apprenticeships and inclusive career pathways. And some of you here, I know, are partners with Sutton Trust, some of you are ex-alumni, some of you are politicians, but all of us feel the same way, that we need to open doors for people that may not have had the opportunities that, for instance, I had coming into banking, and that's exactly the right thing to do. At Deutsche Bank, we strongly believe that where you come from should never limit where you can go. Since 2017, our partnership with the Sutton Trust has supported more than 1,500 students from lower socio-economic backgrounds, helping unlock opportunities in financial services and beyond. This initiative was built on research from the Sutton Trust back in 2014, which revealed that both senior and entry-level roles in the financial sector were overwhelmingly filled by individuals from a narrow range of socio-economic backgrounds. Fast forward 10 years, and challenges remain the same. 89% of senior roles in financial services are still held by these individuals. Students from lower income families experience a 25% slower promotion rate. That's why the Pathways to Banking and Finance programme remains so critical. It reflects our ongoing commitment to industry-wide collaboration, breaking down barriers, and creating a financial sector that truly reflects the world we live in, where potential, not postcode, determine progress. We are deeply committed to driving meaningful, long-term change in the space of social mobility. We recognise the critical role we play in creating access, opportunity, and aspiration for young people from all backgrounds. Our Pathways programme is just one part of this broader vision. As part of our corporate social responsibility strategy, we're proud to support initiatives that have already reached over 100,000 students each year, and we're just getting started. Our early careers team has expanded access routes into the bank through individuals like our investment bank and technology apprenticeships, as well as advanced insight programme, which helps us identify and nurture future talent from underrepresented backgrounds. And I have to say, having just opened this a couple of weeks ago to these very students that come in, it's been fantastic. I mean, it would be so bad, I'm off script now, by the way, but it would be so bad if we just had a room full of mini-me's. It's brilliant that we bring all sorts of people with different views to the boardroom, to the table. I mean, the meetings I have, I never want to hear what I want, my opinions. I genuinely encourage other people's opinions. And that's why we need to have a room full of not mini-me's, definitely. That would be very boring. We're going to hear today, we're going to hear fresh insights from global apprenticeship models, and most importantly, how we can apply those lessons to strengthen our own approach here in the UK. It's a chance to think differently, to collaborate more broadly, and create even more inclusive and effective pathways into careers. We're incredibly proud of our partnership with Sutton Trust, and I want to thank them for bringing together such an impressive group of speakers today, all of whom bring deep expertise and real passion for expanding access through apprenticeships. So I'm really looking forward to hearing their perspectives, and I hope you are too. And I know this conversation will leave us all inspired to take action. Thank you again for being here. Thank you again for putting up with my slightly dishevelled look this morning. Enjoy the speakers, lean in, listen. And what I always tell my team is lean in, listen, and take away something you didn't know before. Thank you very much. Have fun. Please, mate, I'm delighted to introduce you to Nick Harrison, who's the CEO of the Sutton Trust. Nick, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy, for that introduction. I think some of us are a bit dishevelled from the Northern Line this morning as well, which was delayed. So, and look, thank you to Deutsche Bank for hosting the event. As you know, as well as you said, we've partnered with the bank for many years now, and Deutsche Bank has really shown sector leadership in building socioeconomic diversity in banking and finance as a founding partner of the Pathways programme, which you mentioned. And it's brilliant to have this opportunity to be jointly running this thought leadership event this morning on a topic which is important to both of us. And for anyone who doesn't know the Sutton Trust, anyone here, we're a national charity. We aim to improve opportunity and social mobility for young people from low-income backgrounds. And we do that through our university apprenticeship and career access programmes, where we're proud to work with over 12,000 young people each year, and through our research and advocacy, which covers topics from birth to the workplace, we say, including apprenticeships, of course. And we couldn't do any of that without the support of our generous partners like Deutsche Bank and many others. So today, the discussion today is based on our recent report, A World of Difference, we called it, which looked at the UK apprenticeship system and compared it to systems in countries like Germany, Switzerland, Australia, Ireland, and others. And we've got a brilliant panel, which I will introduce in a moment for the discussion. But just a couple of framing points from me first, really. We're having this event because it's really important to get apprenticeships right in the UK. We know they can be a brilliant path for young people to follow who don't want to go down the university route, improving social mobility and opportunity for everybody. And of course, the idea of earning while you learn is a really attractive proposition, for many, many young people. But also, we know we've got a huge skill shortage in the UK. I think, the stats I've got here, almost a third of job vacancies are related to skill shortages, and about 1 million of the 2.5 job roles in critical demand areas need some kind of on-the-job training to fill them. And, we know employers want young people with real-world skills, and we also know we've got almost 1 million young people NEET, so not in employment, education or training at the moment, who we need to bring back into the workforce. And obviously, great apprenticeships can help those individuals and the country to solve many of those issues. But as I'm sure we'll get onto in this discussion in a moment, while there are some brilliant employers offering amazing apprenticeship opportunities, overall, the UK system is not delivering what it could. It's not delivering on its promise. So really, this is a super important area for us at the Sutton Trust. We see apprenticeships as a critical part of breaking down barriers to opportunity for less advantaged young people, but only if we get the system right. So, on that note, I will introduce the panel, who will have all the answers, of course, to this as we go along. So we have Andrew Pakes, MP for Peterborough and co-chair of the Apprenticeship APPG in Parliament. We have Anna Morrison, the founder and director of Amazing Apprenticeships, which is an organisation which works with government, employers, colleges and schools to champion apprenticeships. We have Ridka Kakar, who's a Sutton Trust alum, a member of our Alumni Leadership Board, and also a current apprentice at the ONS, can't say it. And we've got, last but not least, Becky Montacute, who's our head of research at the Sutton Trust and worked on the report. So I think what we'll do is we'll go to the panellists in turn. I'll start with you, Andrew, and maybe just spend sort of 4 or 5 minutes sharing your thoughts on what we can do to improve apprenticeships in the UK.
Well, look, thank you very much. It's beautiful to be in a cold room after having done
Yes.
the transport thing.
Yes.
But more than that, you are the cool room for my day, given I'm heading back to Parliament after this. So look, it's a privilege to be here. Firstly, to be in an employer which is walking the walk on this issue. So thank you for hosting us this morning, and with the Sutton Trust, who do amazing work on this. This is my passion in life. It's been my passion before I entered Parliament, working in engineering, and my industrial experience is now my passion in Parliament for it. And I think the framing of the report is really helpful. I think there's a few things that I reflect on and have an ability to perhaps influence as a member of Parliament in the new government, how we get this right. And I suppose I look at those as downstream and upstream. I think downstream, We've got some changes coming on board. We've seen some with the move to functional English and maths and making things more practical, the move to the growth and skills levy, the focus we've seen in the spending review about 10-year plans, 39 billion for housing, putting some long-term thinking into how policies are delivered means there's a chance to re-engineer. I'm really positive about the move from iFATE to Skills England. I'm really positive about this idea that we want to get more employers involved. Earlier this week, I spent some time in the Department for Education with some of the leading house builders and the CITB and the Minister looking at the Construction Skills Mission Board. How do we re-engineer the way policy is delivered so that business need and industrial need is in there? And I think some of those things are really important. I think we've got to see how it plays out. We talk about flexibility. I would love some flexibility in some of the frameworks and standards so that employers have a bit more of a chance to shape some of the industrial needs or business needs you have to do some of those things. I think some of the idea of how you can make some transfer of levy funding, particularly between big employers to small employers, a really important issue in things like construction, where you've got some monster players who are huge, but a really long tail of supply chain. In terms of how do you get that right. Look, and I'm really passionate about this because I believe in it. I'm passionate about it because I represent a place which is one of the forgotten cities and towns of this country. So I represent a place where half the children are growing up in poverty. I live in a place where those young people who do go to university never come back to the city and never pay back in terms of their income to it. We have one of the highest levels of adults with no skills at all. We have one of the highest levels. 1 in 3 people in work is essentially on a 0 hours contract. So this idea of the vision I grew up with from my parents, which is working class parents like mine could work bloody hard so that me and my brother could have a better job, is broken in this country. And that's what takes me to the upstream thing. There's actually a cultural thing. When you say what can government do, government can do a lot more than what it does.
Yeah.
But I think all of us in this room have to change the story we're telling, because one of the challenges I find, having worked in Germany with colleagues in Sweden, Scandinavia, is we have a cultural issue with apprenticeships and our academic system, which is one of the big reasons that holds us back. We have created university as a fetish in this country, and I was a big supporter of 50%, and now look back at it, and I got it wrong. I think it was right for the time to say so few young people going on to university. We have made it a fetish to the detriment of our economy and to the detriment of opportunities for young people. And that's why I think the things aren't just about apprenticeship redesign. To me, one of the most powerful things in the manifesto I stood on, which we need to get on to, is about redesigning career services, about making it easier for young people in the place I represent to find work experience which is meaningful. For the small engineering companies and those which are innovating and trying to rechange and re-engineer the economy in my place, an ability for them to get into schools and give genuine experiences so that people can make choices about them. But my final point is, and we've got to end the snobbery. When we think about all the jobs we talk about, when we think about the language we use, there is an unconscious bias, because so many of us have been to university, we talk about the things we know best about. So when we talk about technology, we talk about the superheroes. We talk about the coders, we talk about the exciting people. You talked about Bletchley Park. But when the government talks about Bletchley Park, old government, current government, it is about the coders and those amazing global jobs. We don't talk about the jobs that in the everyday economy. And actually, if we want to change social mobility in a place like my thing, actually getting a generation of young people to be the next generation of electricians and sparks and house builders will transform their lives and transform the city I live in. But we always look down on those jobs. So it's time to change that whole cultural argument if we want government to succeed. And if we don't, government will fail.
Great, thank you. Anna, do you want to go next? We'll come back to some of that, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Morning, everyone, and thank you also to Deutsche Bank for hosting us this morning and Sutton Trust for inviting me to be on the panel and for a really exceptional report, because it highlights many things that I passionately believe in and champion regularly. So I left school about 30 years ago, which ties in with the 50% going to university, doesn't it? So I was very much of that generation where there was a huge push to get more people to go to university, and that was my peer group. I was the black sheep. I didn't want to go to university, but there wasn't any real alternative for me. So that's where my passion comes from, actually. I can still go back to being that young person in a sixth form thinking, but I just want to get a job. I just want to get working. I don't want to go to university in that traditional sense, but that didn't mean that I didn't value learning. I just wanted to do it in a different way. You'll get this with me. I'm quite rebellious in a very professional way, of course. So Amazing Apprenticeships, we're actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary now. It's a small business. It's one that I've grown very much based on that passion of mine, that we need to be doing more to inform and inspire young people in schools, but that we also needed to be looking at the key influencers around those young people, so teachers, careers advisors, parents and carers, so that young people were experiencing multiple touch points of positivity around apprenticeships. When I was at school, I'm sure many of you can think back to when apprenticeships were talked about in your schools, perhaps they were seen as for people who weren't going to be able to study academically at higher levels, or perhaps were seen as naughty or troublesome or needed something different, and that was very much my experience. It couldn't be more different to how it is today. However, we still do need opportunities for those young people for whom the systems are failing them. And this is where a lot of my work now focuses. I spend hours and hours each week working directly with young people, often marginalised young people who have been failed by our systems, who haven't achieved GCSE English and Maths, or have had to leave the education system, the formal education system, before they were ready to, or have perhaps moved into employment or underemployment, and then find themselves perhaps in the NEET group, so not in education, employment or training. And that group is growing and growing, and we really need to understand more about those young people, because there's a bit of a perception out there that perhaps they don't want to work, or aren't ready to work, or aren't prepared to work. Actually, I meet thousands of young people who really, really want to get into apprenticeships, but we don't have the pathways for them. So in our more recent apprenticeship reforms, there's been such a swing towards higher education and degree apprenticeships. We've really forgotten the stepping stones, and this gap is getting bigger. So I think it's brilliant that the report really highlights the need for opportunities at level 2 and level 3. I would challenge the system even more, because we need pre-apprenticeships. We need to fill that space to inspire and build confidence with young people, to be able to help them to then see the world of opportunity that could be there for them through apprenticeships. But there's a bit we need to do first to get them ready to be able to learn and take on all of the pressures as well that apprenticeships bring. It's not an easy thing to get an apprenticeship, and it's even harder to stay on an apprenticeship as well. So as well as widening access to opportunity and helping young people to find their way into apprenticeships, I think we need to give as much, if not more, focus to the on-programme support, and really look at those wraparound services for young people that are going to set them up with the conditions for success rather than failure. Thank you.
Oh, great, thanks, Anna. Yeah, and as you say, as we know, the dropout rates are just too high at the moment.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll come back to Rika. Do you want to share your thoughts next?
Quick thank you. Thank you to Sutton Trust for having me, and Deutsche Bank for this amazing venue. I'm Ritika. I'm a third-year economics degree apprentice at the ONS. And talking a little bit from my experience, I would say my apprenticeship journey has been really positive, but accessing them at the start was kind of tricky to navigate. So I went to a non-selective state school where there was a massive push in going to university, and like a lot of my apprentice friends, I did apply to uni, and it was actually my dad that kind of planted the idea of, why don't you try apprenticeships? So, I went on that journey of doing all that research, like what is an apprenticeship? What do they entail? How long are they? And then also like which ones are available, and more importantly, which careers actually interest me? And it was one of those things where, because they didn't talk about it in my college as much, it wasn't shame, but it felt really uncomfortable to bring it up. Like, I'm also applying for apprenticeships alongside, uni and, all the college stuff. But I did eventually reach out to my careers advisor, who was wonderful and really helped me with interview prep. And I think it's one of the things in the paper that is so important, because I think, as a young person, I didn't really get those experiences. I'd never applied for a job. I didn't know the process of applying for an apprenticeship, and I did the majority of the research by myself about apprenticeships. And then I guess on the other side of it is also not just the information side, like we need to know more for young people, but also the supply side. When I applied, I had no idea that 12,000 other people applied for like 50 spaces, which is a massive ego boost, but had I known, I probably wouldn't have applied.
Literally 12,000 to 50, was it? Wow. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, there's so many young people that want to an apprenticeship, and they range from like 50 people to just 1 or 2 people, and it's such a diversity, and it's like, you know, why would I apply if they're only hiring 1 person, kind of thing. And then moving on to my current apprenticeship and how it's going, I would say I'm having a really positive experience. You know, I've developed loads of skills, I get a good mix of on-the-job and off-the-job training, and loads of support from both my university and my employer. But I think that's what reading the report that really stood out to me, like some interesting facts, like the fact that 40% drop out because of like the training and the qualifications. And I think, you know, guidelines around what does the university side entail is so important, and the fact that there is a massive shift of it being online, which is great in terms of accessibility, but when you consider, you know, there's a whole cohort of you and you're not always meeting face to face, you need that interactability and also like speaking to your lecturer in person. I'm really fortunate that mine has spaces where you can have like face to face lessons as well as online, but it's unfortunate that that's not the case for everyone. And I think also, supporting apprentices, I think a great thing that our apprenticeship has is that we have an apprentice advisor, which is kind of the link between the university and the employer side, so I can reflect on like how my university studies are going alongside, since we last met like 6-8 weeks ago, how I've been developing the skills that I need and those targets that have been set for the year. And I don't think every employer has that, and it means that apprentices might not be getting that experience that they signed up for and those skills that they need to continue to develop. And I think the other thing is, like, since we are at a Sutton Trust event, is considering low socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's one of those things where they might not get the same education on apprenticeships as young people, and they might not have the skills to apply for jobs. From my experience, each apprenticeship application was different and the process was different. And I think getting that knowledge to them, which might be a bit harder, but it would be so valuable, especially since, you know, we know people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and more deprived people are probably more debt averse. They're less likely to take on that university burden of getting those loans. And then I think also another thing that I think is really important is considering location. The hybrid shift is great because you get the in-person element and the online element, but then a few apprenticeships ask you to relocate, and a lot of apprentices are probably on like minimum wage,
Yeah.
which is great because I kind of understand it. You're getting the skills, you're getting those training development, but then, you know, having to relocate for a job, housing costs, food costs, all the cost of living things that we're considering, it becomes an extra burden, and it might be more of a deterrent than it should be. But I think overall, like, the paper was really good at highlighting these things and like considering apprenticeships, access, supporting current apprentices, and then also those from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Yeah.
Brilliant. No, thanks for sharing that. And I think we know that the stats bear out exactly what you're saying, right? Which is the proportion of folks from a low socioeconomic background, particularly on a degree apprenticeship, is really, really low at the moment. So the access just isn't there, basically. Becky, do you want to go to you, maybe share some highlights from the report?
Yeah, so before we open it out to questions, I'll just give a general kind of summary view of the research that we recently put out. There is absolutely loads more within the report itself, so please do, if you haven't already, take a look at it afterwards. But I'll try to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the research that we did. So obviously we've heard already this morning about a lot of the issues that are in the UK and England specifically's apprenticeship system, and I think there's a general understanding that it's not doing as well as it could be. So we commissioned this research because we wanted to understand a lot more about, okay, what are other people doing, and where could we specifically take learnings from those other countries and bring them back to England's system. And we really specifically wanted to not just do the kind of usual suspects. So everyone always talks about Germany's apprenticeship system is amazing, Switzerland's amazing. They aren't in the report, but we also wanted to take learnings from other countries with kind of more similar, broader economies, things that perhaps were more transferable. Now, there are transferable things, I think, from
the Germanys and the Switzerlands of this world, but we've taken that kind of broader range view to get as many learnings, hopefully, as possible from it. So we commissioned leading international vocational expert Simon Field. I think he's not managed to make it this morning, because I was going to say you could nab him for any other questions afterwards, but unfortunately you've only got me. But so he did this report and took this kind of broad look across systems. And I'm going to focus on 3 aspects of that report this morning. Diversity of provision and how that differs internationally. Expectations and quality in England's system versus our international competitors, and also what we can learn from those global systems on improving access. So first off, on diversity of provision. England has one of the most diverse apprenticeship systems in the world. Now, there is some provision that is very, very good, but it has also allowed a lot of provision that is really bad and falls below what should be seen as a reasonable standard. The length of apprenticeships varies massively, from as little now as 8 months to 6 years. That compares to something like 3 to 3.5 years in Germany, or 2 to 4 years in somewhere like Ireland. England's system also covers a really wide range of education levels and occupations. So we've talked about this a little bit already today, but you can have anything from a dual fuel smart meter installer all the way through to something extremely specific, all the way through to something like a teacher, which is obviously extremely broad. Now, employers will want to be able to do the dual fuel smart meter installer version, because that's the need they have in that business at that specific time. But the apprenticeship system should be about balancing those needs of the employer with the broader needs of the apprentice and the economy. And I think we don't quite have that mix right at the moment for some of those apprenticeships, because, you know, that dual fuel smart meter installer might need to become something else later on in their career. And it has that standard really set them up to be able to do that over their whole career? Or is it just serving that employer in the short term? So I think making sure that balance is better would be a real kind of improvement. And also, we would like to see the government reinstating the 12-month limit on apprenticeships. Now, on the side of that, there is a place for kind of shorter pre-apprenticeships that get people ready to go into a full apprenticeship. But I think the system as we have it now is diluting what you'd expect from an apprenticeship and is quite out of step compared to our international competitors. Now, on the second one of expectations and quality, there are actually really loose off-the-job training requirements in England, and the kind of expectations at the moment are quite widely ignored. So English apprentices should spend about 6 hours a week on their off-the-job training. Now, that's quite often online and of quite poor quality, and compares to somewhere like Denmark, where actually 20% of their programme is spent in school-based teaching, so they're actually getting higher quality teaching for a longer period of time. But even those minimum standards aren't often being met. So in 2023, 300,000 apprentices received less than their training entitlement, and almost 75,000 had no training. Now, that should be absolutely shocking for all of us. That's not what the apprenticeship system is meant to be delivering. And those kind of failures impact lower income background apprentices, those from disadvantaged backgrounds, the most, because they are the least able to hold their provider, their employer to account and demand the training that they should be getting. So we'd like to see improvements there, minimum requirements for face-to-face training, and tighter enforcements of the existing training requirements. And just finally, the third being, what can we learn internationally from all these apprenticeship models on widening access and the programs that other countries are doing? So first off, as we've heard throughout, that need for those pre-apprenticeship programs, making sure that we've got proper set-up programs to get people ready for apprenticeships who aren't quite there yet. Unfortunately, because of issues in the training system earlier on in the education system, that will quite often be young people from lower income backgrounds, because they haven't had the right level of support, they've not been able to get the level of attainment necessary. So that kind of pre-apprenticeship could be particularly helpful for those groups of young people. And also, we should be looking internationally at some of the programs they've got to specifically target and support lower income young people into apprenticeships. So there's all different kind of examples worldwide. Sometimes they also target different groups. So for instance, in Australia, there are programs to help people from Aboriginal backgrounds specifically to access apprenticeships. A really interesting example we've highlighted in the report is in Ireland. They now have a 15-week access to apprenticeships programme that gives a chance to sample apprenticeships in a range of different sectors for young people, and also gives them access to wider support to help to get them prepared for an apprenticeship. And really important, they have bursaries to help young people attend, targeted for those on lower income, from lower income families. And we would love to see that kind of programme actually introduced by government. Of course, there's those like Amazing Apprenticeships, our access to apprenticeships programme for degree apprenticeships trying to do this work, but we should be seeing a much larger national effort on that as well. So that's a little bit of a whirlwind. Hopefully it's given you a bit of a flavour of what's in the report. And as I said, there's much more in there, and happy to answer any questions on it as well.
No, thank you, Becky. We'll come back to a bunch of that in a second, I'm sure. So maybe I'll just kick us off with a rapid fire question quickly to each of the panel, and then we'll go to audience questions. So do start thinking about your questions. Maybe Andrew, first to you, just quickly. You know, we've heard there that there are a whole bunch of really great apprenticeships, but that quality is an issue in some of the sector. What do you think is the most effective thing government could do to drive up quality?
Well, I think there is a lot of quality out there. There's great employers, Deutsche Bank, the co-op, lots of the energy sector I work with have got really good traditions of doing this. Where I think, in terms of general trends, I've often found those businesses and industries that think about the long term, be it the energy sector, be it infrastructure, tend to have a partnership approach, which tends to get things done. So to me, the biggest thing government can do is not really about design of apprenticeships. It's actually about changing our economic model so that we have some long-term security in thinking. The question I've got back, which I'm really interested, and my experience would be, which actually, did you consider employee participation as a factor within how some of these models work in doing? Because what has always struck me about Sweden, Germany, other countries I've gone to where they're better is, do you know what? They've got 90% union density. They have social partnership and collective bargaining. They have employee representatives and shop stewards working alongside HR and IR to design and make things work. Their model of capitalism is fundamentally different. It's long-term, it's about social value, it's about involving people in it, and it's about having accountability inside companies and businesses. It doesn't solve everything, but just about every country which is better than us has a different model of how businesses work on the ground. It doesn't solve SMEs. So to me, the stuff about the Employment Rights Act we'll bring in, which will change the model of how we can redefine what British capitalism looks like, is key to that. Having an industrial strategy with apprenticeships linked to that is about saying, actually, there's a long-term investment in partnership. No, you lift the bonnet and there's loads of small bits of design, but to me, long-term thinking, a long-term commitment is key cultural aspect for getting this right.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and that would bring that buy-in across the sectors. No, that's really interesting. Anna, quick rapid fire to you is, across all the countries we looked at and any others, what is your kind of fantasy football league apprenticeship system?
There we go.
What do you say?
I'm a football coach now.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So I know what I'm talking about. For me, I think when I look at our apprenticeship system, it feels like it's really modelled on trying to avoid risk. So it doesn't incentivise employers, training providers to be really ambitious for our young people, but actually it disincentivises it. So if you have got young people who are less likely to stay on a programme and achieve, then training providers will receive less money if an apprentice doesn't stay and achieve. So we've put a risk element in. A fifth of training provider funding, it disappears if an apprentice doesn't stay and achieve. That is huge. The amount of funding that if you look at our balance, so the way our apprenticeship funding scale works is our lower level apprenticeships are quite low funded, so around £3,000, £4,000. Degree apprenticeships, £27,000. If we flipped that and really thought about putting £27,000 into some of our most disadvantaged young people, it could be transformational. And so I think when we look at other countries, I think they're far more ambitious, I think they're a bit more creative, and I would love to see a bit more of that in our system.
Yeah, no,
That's my magic wand.
Yeah, magic wand, thank you. Ridke, to your magic wand, if you could change one thing that would help engage young people from lower socioeconomic groups, what would you have changed, of the sort of the pathway and the experience?
I guess a very broad answer is go to where they are. I think something that I noticed a lot is that there's a lot of degree apprenticeships advertised on LinkedIn. I can promise you 16-year-olds are not on LinkedIn.
Yes, no, it's also...
they are not there. Engage with their schools, engage with teachers. So I think there is also that learning gap of, teachers having that university focus and, going back to, they went to uni, that's what's best for their students, but maybe it's not best for every student. And, engage, talking to those teachers, those schools, and then those apprentices, those future apprentices themselves, careers fairs, in-person talks, online, doing those things, showing the apprentices that you have, I think is really beneficial. A lot of the time, you don't meet an apprentice until you're actually, partway through the interview process and they want you to know what the experience is. But in fact, you'd probably want to know before you sign up. So, just going where they are, to be honest.
No, sounds good. And Becky, single most important recommendation from the report, if you had to pick one?
That would be absolutely on training and improving the training offer. I think that's the biggest weakness that allows this combination of very good quality provision and also some that is very, very poor. I'll just come back, if that's okay, briefly on Andrew's question as well about employer participation. So I totally agree. I've kind of obviously made the point of some places where I think perhaps employers get too much say, but that isn't to say that they shouldn't be very deeply involved in what the creation of the standards are. They will know what are needed in those industries. I just think it needs to be a bit of a balance. And I think that's a very good point that the report probably doesn't go into enough, to be honest, is exactly how that system works within each country. One thing I would flag that is included in the report is about the employer incentives on offer, and actually those in England are quite poor in terms of paying for off-the-time training for apprentices and things like that. So I think that's another area that we could definitely improve on that would be of benefit and help employers to engage.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Audience question time now. We've got a mic with Ryan there, and if I could just ask if folks just say who you are and then just keep the questions short if we can, please. The chap at the front here.
Hi, thank you. Full disclosure, my name's Terence Grant. I work in the IB technology part of Deutsche Bank. I am also the sponsor for our technology apprentice program.
Oh, great.
I'm interested really on some of the points that Andrew talks around the fetish side of our perceived obsession with university. When I speak to parents and colleges and schools around the program that we offer, I compare it with the experience of going to university. Essentially, you might spend 3 or 4 years doing that. You may or may not get a job at the end of it. You're likely to work in something like Starbucks or KFC. Nothing wrong with KFC, by the way. While you're working for your degree, and there's no guaranteed outcome. Whereas I compare that to what we offer at Deutsche Bank, potentially a 18-month at level 4 or 4-year apprenticeship to level 6, a degree at the end of it, being paid while you get the experience, real life work, real life experience. It's a no-brainer. So I think we can move away from that view that apprentices aren't a good thing. The key thing is, though, to do that and deliver that, Deutsche Bank work extremely hard. We have to provide mentors, managers, buddies, a huge HR input. What do you feel employers should have access to enable them to provide the better experience? And that's to anyone in the panel.
Maybe Andrew, do you want to come back quickly on the kind of prestige point first, and then we'll go to the broader question?
Absolutely. And the good news in all of that, and I say some of this slightly provocatively because I think sometimes we just regard policy as a kind of dispassionate thing, and we should be passionate about this subject. So I do go slightly to the edge of what I'm talking about. The really good thing is all of you in this room can help change that, because you're all here, you care, you're a learner, an apprentice, an employer, a provider, and actually we know that human psychology learns from stories and hearing from different people. But look, the system challenge is, and I'm not being provocative on this, our career system doesn't exist in schools and is broken. We rely on some good teachers and some good parents and good governors doing a bit, and it becomes very informal and often reinforces a lack of social mobility. But we've created a system where why should we expect a different outcome? Because too many, most teachers have been to university. So that's their unconscious bias. That's what they understand about the experiences. We talk about the things we know about best. We've got an Ofsted and school system which looks for schools to send people to university. So we've incentivised an education system which says success is university. You've then got, when you turn on TV, you open magazines, the good jobs are the white-collar top jobs rather than the everyday jobs. We don't talk about the contribution and nature of labour and work in our country. So all different, when you turn on the telly, twice a year, you've got mortarboards being thrown in the air, A-levels. We don't have celebrations on the news of people doing brilliant things. Great employers do it. I know probably Deutsche Bank, lots of the construction companies, lots of the infrastructure companies really celebrate and cherish the brilliance of their mentors, the learners, the apprentices, and I've been to loads of those things, but it's a hidden story. So actually, the biggest thing I think we can do is break that model even further and rebuild it. Dedicated career services. It needs to be some form of brokerage, because what's really interesting is, and I think Whitaker's point's right, which is young people, the career change is a different thing, but for young learners, people respond to people like them. So how do we incentivise not getting me into schools, but getting actual apprentices? So people can see someone a couple of years ahead of them and think that's aspirational, that's attainable. How do we create a brokerage system so that Mark, who runs a small engineering company in my patch, doesn't have to give up running his company to go into schools? Why should he have to write to 100 schools? Because that's a lot. Because for Deutsche Bank, you'll have a database and someone who can manage that, knowing the schools you want to go into, building that relationship. If you're Mark with 17 employees who has 3 apprentices, that's a really hard thing to do. So we've got to create a brokerage in here in career services to address some of that early, before you even get into pre-work, understanding what your choices are and creating a story of success around these brilliant, wonderful, fantastic things people can do through apprenticeships, to which you are testimony of.
Brilliant. And Anna, what are the employers you work with saying they want and need to follow more? The track you were mentioning there.
It's really interesting. I might have to do a slightly politician-y thing and flip it back to you. But I think when we look at that, so you've got a cohort of young people that you've spotted the talent and the potential in them. Is it seen as a cost to the business, as a kind of annoying cost? We're going to have to find extra money to support here, or is it an investment? And is it kind of thinking, actually, we've spotted the diverse talent that we know we want different voices, different backgrounds around the table, and that's going to cost us money. And I think what we've got to try and understand is with that cost investment, whichever side we land on, is there a way that government could be supporting employers to do more of that? And so then my mind goes to the levy and all of the returned millions, billions over the years that have gone back into Treasury that haven't been reinvested in apprenticeships. It's gone, it's disappeared. And so I wonder if actually we should be challenging Treasury even more to give some of that money back to provide support to be able to do some of that stuff. What I also don't want to see is a two-tier system where levy payers can then access money and non-levy payers, small businesses like myself taking on apprentices, can't access any of that. So within that ask, I'd like to see parity, but I'd love to know if it's kind of more cost or investment on your side, or a balance of both perhaps.
Yeah, I think that our programme is very competitive. We start with 1,500 applicants a year, and we might be able to offer 15 places. The reality is we want to offer 150 places.
Yep.
That's the ideal model for us. The reality is that it would take an enormous amount of effort to support them.
Yeah.
And I'm conscious I don't want to hog the stage here, but the reality is it's as good as experience as any university.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're able to come to a real workplace. We offer 20% training time. We offer immense support. And remember, we're developing not only the next generation, we're developing young people. We're growing as individuals, as they are also growing as employees, and that's a really important journey to support. And the reality is that we're passionate. We really want to do it. We just we need extra support to expand it. And we're fortunate. We're a large corporation. We can support some of that, but we want that to be the same for everybody. And we want that culture to be developed in the UK as it is in Germany, in many other parts of Europe.
No, it's a good point on that, and on your point about the flexibility on the levy. I mean, I had a conversation with a big employer a few months ago who were saying they wanted to use some of the levy to build an analytics apprenticeship centre in the north. Of course, you're not allowed to use the levy to do that because it has to be directly for the training. So that was an example of something that sort of didn't work. Anyway, other questions from the audience? With a chap there in the middle, and then we'll go right to the back next.
Thanks. Neil McCabe from Bank of New York. So fantastic answers, and I'd echo the point that my friend from Deutsche Bank just said. I think a quick win would be from that levy funding to be able to take some of that for salary costs for people like me and a lot of us within the business. But I suppose this is 2 points, if I may. And I suppose this is to Andrew. I think one of the things that we've done in the last couple of months since the new government's come in is there's been a real lack of clarity as what's happening on level 6 and level 7 apprenticeships. And that's coming to some sort of decision, but there's still uncertainty. What's that's meant for us and my senior managers is almost to press pause because they didn't know what to do. So we've almost got a year now where we're taking on far less direct apprentices and also using the levy for internal retention and development. And I'd also like to say, and I know this panel and the report about what we do perhaps not as well as other countries, but I work for an American business and they are so inspired by what we do in the UK for apprenticeships. Yeah. And we're trying to now replicate what we do. And that, you know, our senior boss literally this week was in Manchester and met one of our apprentices who's still 18 years old, and he's just as impressive as the kids who have been to your red brick universities and are just coming in now on graduate schemes. So, you know, we do really well. Yeah. And hopefully we'll keep going. And Radke, you've done a great job representing it.
Yeah, great. Did you want us to comment on that? Or quick, just super quick? Or?
Yeah, I give challenge to the government. I give challenge in audiences like this. I've not been an MP for a year yet. There is going to be some natural change in things. I will actually stand behind fully and support the switch off of level 7 funding within the levy, because you've got to pick your favourite children when money's tight, and my favourite children are 3, 4 and 5, and I will go for, and I will defend it, because people in my constituency, they're the jobs they need, and you've got to do it in everything. So let me finish my point around it. My bigger point is we have created a problem in this country where we regard the levy as training budgets for companies.
Yeah, that absolutely.
They are not. It is a levy for apprenticeships, and if you go to some of those other countries where apprentices, I bet you, having worked across a number of them, the way they spend on training in companies is very different, and apprenticeships are one part of that. So level 7s exist, and if big companies want to do them, big companies should fund them and do them themselves. And I know that's a tough one. I'm going to the edge. I'm provoking you back, but I will defend it, because in a place like mine, where apprenticeships have gone down, it has been a crisis. It is shameful how we masked the fall in 2, 3 and 4s in a place like mine and allowed level 7 to mask that, and I will happily say the funding should go there, and in 3 or 4 years, if we reverse it, let's look at it again.
Can I add just a slight appendage to that? 'Cause I think I broadly agree that it is a problem that we've had such a focus and movement towards high level apprenticeships and where the levy funding is going. I would say I think there are some exceptions to that though. Like for instance, I'm quite certain that the medical degree apprenticeships that were planned but have not quite happened yet would be level 7 by the point you finish it. Anna knows more than me. Yeah, brilliant. And those are ones where, you know, we've got a clear skills need in this country, where we have a huge underrepresentation. We did a report on this recently of people from working class backgrounds going into medicine, and this could be a really useful route. And obviously something that would more broadly support growth so that there's more money overall to be able to go into the system. So I think there are some high level apprenticeships that absolutely government funding should be going into, but I agree with the broader point.
Concessions been made on level 7, but also the NHS is bigger than the Red Army. It has huge training budgets, and actually it needs to make choices as well.
No, fair.
I know it's my question, I don't want to hog it back. And I don't think we do agree.
We can continue this over a cup of coffee in a minute.
Yeah. The levy fund is our money. We have 2 years to use that. And it's really, I think it's very disappointing to hear, to think that programmes that have proven, and we were trying to do a level 7 legal apprenticeship in Manchester for people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who couldn't go and do the law degree. And those numbers have reduced from 12 to 4. And that's because of uncertainty. And
Yeah.
now those 4, we would have done it every year, as I understand it, we won't be able to do it next year. So I'm absolutely with you about become a welder, become a plumber. You learn more, it's fantastic jobs. But don't think that level 7 is just for your posh businesses who could afford to do it anyway. We won't do it otherwise. And we'll lose that retention and we'll lose that development. Not using it.
Yeah, I'm going to come to one last question right at the back there, just while we get the mic up. Just Ridke, question to you. You don't know, do you, at the ONS, what proportion of the sort of intake is apprenticeships versus graduate track? Do you know, off the top of your head? Just interested.
Perfectly honest, no. Having said that, I think the way at least my scheme works is that they take around 50-60.
Yeah.
ONS probably takes quite a large chunk of that, a good 10-15.
Yeah.
I will say over the coming years, the numbers have decreased.
Right.
As opposed to graduates, there's a lot more.
Yeah.
Significantly more. Can't put a number on it, probably.
So even though it's strong at the ONS, it is,
Yeah.
is a minority still compared to
Yeah.
the graduate. Yeah. Last question at the back there.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Greer. I'm a parent of a 19-year-old who is currently applying for apprenticeships. And my view is that the image of apprenticeships, that's sufficiently high, and that's reflected in the large volume of applications for, especially for the more coveted apprenticeships from the FTSE listed companies. So it's not really the image. Things have definitely changed, and we've heard that today. So, for example, the 1,500 applicants for 15 places, 12,000 applicants for 50 places. I've actually spoken to some FTSE companies, and they said that the successful candidates have been the ones with direct work experience. Now, I know what the rationale for that is, and that is they're trying to reduce dropout, and we've heard the panel have kindly touched upon that already. But for school leavers in particular, having direct work experience when they clearly fit the academic eligibility criteria is very, very difficult, and that needs to be addressed and raised in the reports and spoken about more, that there's a discrepancy in terms of what the employer wants and what is mainly talked about, which is one of the problems for one of the faults in the system. One of the faults in the system is that direct work experience is actually a vital component, even though, and it's not a preferred one.
Yeah, and it's often not easy to get that. Just quickly, Ridke, did that come up in your recruitment of work experience as part of the recruitment process?
No, which is why I'm slightly surprised.
Right, no, I think it is a lot that we've seen the same at the Sutton Trust.
Yeah, I think it depends on company. Obviously, haven't done the research, I don't know. But I also think a part of that, like work experience, I can understand that, but also is interviewing skills. I think I have been really fortunate in my job where I've got to actually interview potential apprentices, and all the questions are based not on work experience, but what skills you can show that you've demonstrated. And there are skills that you can show that you've done in schools, in clubs, and those spaces that you're going to already. And I think there might be some employers that do value work experience, but I think equally there's the case and argument that the way you present yourself and the way you explain your answers for interviews and for those scenarios is very different to what a normal 16-year-old has done before. Like, it's not a skill they know, and it's making sure you can actually push that when you're applying.
Brilliant. And Anna, I'm going to give the last word to you. If you want to just comment quickly on that, then I'm going to have to
Yeah,
close.
absolutely. And I'm sorry, this is possibly a report 2.0. This is what needs to happen. You brought up brilliantly the unsuccessful applicant rate. And this is one of our biggest losses, I think, in this country. We have hundreds of thousands of individuals applying to apprenticeships, and a number of those will be successful, but huge numbers won't be. We don't have a good system for for scooping up those interested candidates and
Yeah, what
keeping
are they
them
going to do?
interested
Yeah.
and redistributing that interest to other employers, particularly supply chains and SMEs who then can't recruit. So I'd love to see something. I wonder what they're doing internationally on that and what we could learn. But catch me afterwards and I'll absolutely help your son and yourself and see what we can do as well.
We'll put that on the research pipeline for 2027.
Great.
I think we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, folks. So thank you to everyone for coming. Perhaps we can just thank our panel and Deutsche Bank for hosting quickly before we... And as I say, we have coffee outside, so we can continue the debates over a cup of coffee. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.